Members of the committee, we are now live.
Thank you, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole Community Development meeting of Tuesday, September 14, 2021. Please rise for the invocation. As we come together today, we recognize the great responsibilities laid upon us. Our council will always strive to understand the needs of the people we serve and to use power wisely and well. Our purpose is to establish and maintain a city of prosperity and righteousness where freedom prevails and where justice rules. Let us also not forget those who serve our community and who are no longer with us, so that we can continue to do the work we must in their memory. Please be seated. Thank you. This evening, our clerk is Julia Sipple, supported by Jennifer Page. Thank you. I'd just like to remind the committee and the viewing public of a few procedural rules for virtual meetings and operating as efficiently as possible. All members will be muted for the meeting to reduce feedback. All web cameras for committee members shall be turned on. Staff will be requested to join the video meeting should the need to answer questions of members of council arise. Any member of the committee should indicate they wish to speak by pressing the raise hand button on the participant list screen, your bottom right hand corner usually. The clerk will lower the hand when you have been recognized by the chair for your speaking opportunity. In the event of a connection service disruption occurs that affects quorum of the committee of the whole, we may recess the meeting for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. If quorum is not achieved, the meeting will be adjourned. All members of the committee participating via online video conferences will vote using eScribe, and the clerk will announce the vote results. Members of the public who registered as delegates or under the statutory public hearing are able to take part electronically via webcam or via the telephone for the meetings. All rules for delegations under the city procedural bylaw do apply. Members of the committee, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest items appearing before this agenda? Seeing none. Okay, at this time, we'll ask members of the committee what items they would like to separate for discussion purposes. Please note items 711 and 713 will be automatically separated due to requiring options to be chosen. Councillor Van Tilburg.
7.1.2.
Okay, 7.1.2. Thank you. Any others? Okay. Okay, I will now call a vote on all items not separated for discussion purposes. And keeping in mind the two that I mentioned, 7.11 and 7.12 and 7.13 have been separated. Clerk, please read the titles of all items for the subject of this vote.
Sorry, just through the chair, we just need a mover first. We have Councillor Wall for that.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Wall. I did have you down for that. My apologies. Councillor Wall with a second, or Councillor Vanderstel. Councillor Wall, you wish to move it?
Yes.
Thank you.
You want me to read it?
Yeah, sure.
That all items for consideration consent 7.1 and 7.2 not separated for discussion purposes be.
Thank you. All items that are subject to this vote are as follows. Item 714, official plan review final update. 715, proposed amendments to City of Brantford Municipal Code, Chapter 554, noise control in response to Main Street Recovery Act, proclamation of amendments to the Municipal Act, and 7.2, all minutes.
Okay, thank you.
So we will try eScribe.
Okay, the vote.
All items not separated for discussion purposes carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstel, Celeste, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, and Carpenter.
Thank you. Congratulations for getting that working. And the committee will now move on to the statutory public hearings, a public meeting process, which is chaired by the Mayor Davis. Mayor Davis, you have the chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carpenter. Good evening, everyone. Reporting to you direct from the Mayor's office in New City Hall. So we'll now commence the public meeting with respect to the proposed 2021 development charges bylaw. The public meeting is being held pursuant to the Development Charges Act 1997 to provide sufficient information so that interested parties may generally understand the review, the background study report, and the proposed bylaw, which would establish development charters applicable to all new development in the city of Brantford. Members of the public in attendance will be provided the opportunity to make representation of the committee regarding these matters. Please note that the names of those individuals who speak will appear within the meeting's minutes. Anyone wishing notification of any further proceedings should send their name and address to the clerk. Pursuant to Section 12 of the Development Charters Act, notice of this public meeting was published in the Civic News on Thursday, August 19, 2021. A copy of the Development Charters background study has been available online through the city's website since August 27, 2021. The proposed bylaw has been available for 2 weeks prior to this meeting. In accordance with the provisions of the Development Charters Act 1997, if oral submissions have not been made at this public meeting or any written submissions lodged with the clerk before a decision is reached, should an appeal be made to the decision of council, the Ontario Land Tribunal may dismiss the appeal. Julia Zernacki of Hemson Consulting Ltd. will speak first as the city's consultant. Following the presentation, members of the public will then be invited to speak, followed by clarification by staff or the consultant if required. So we'll now consider item 5.1, which is 2021 Development Charters Background Study, Statutory Public Meeting, Proposed Development Charge Rates and Bylaw 2021-588. I now ask staff and Hemson Consulting to present to the committee, and the presenter should please state their name and then present. Julia, I think you're up.
All right, thank you very much. I'm Julia Saraki from Hemson Consulting. Thanks for having me today. First, just to highlight that the purpose of the study was to calculate both the citywide and area-specific development charges for Brantford, particularly following completion of the city's new official plan, transportation master plan, and master servicing plan. And the process actually began in late 2020 when we initiated the area-specific development charge, or ASDC, component of the study to introduce ASDCs for the settlement expansion area lands. That ASDC bylaw was passed in the spring of this year and is in force. And since that time, we've worked through the citywide DC background study, as well as minor changes to the ASDC calculations based on the finalized TMP and MSP details. Now just moving on to the next slide, please. So this is a statutory public meeting that's required by the Development Charges Act, and the primary purpose is really to provide the public with an opportunity to make representation on the proposed DC background study and bylaw. As the mayor mentioned, the background study was made publicly available a few weeks ago, and the proposed DC bylaw was made available, I believe, 2 weeks ago today. I'm just moving on. So a key component of the study is the development forecasts. So our citywide development forecast is summarized here. I won't get into this in too much detail just in the interest of time, but all the details are available in the background study, which is on the city's webpage. So the study uses 2 planning periods. The 10-year period from 2021 to 2030 is used for the calculation of general services, or essentially our soft services DCs. And then a longer planning period to 2051 is used for the engineered services. So that's roads, water, wastewater, and stormwater management. And that includes both the citywide and area-specific engineered services DCs. So we do have area-specific forecasts as well included in the study. Our citywide forecasts shown here are consistent with the provincial growth plan and the city's recent MCR and official plan. And then just an important side note here that the census population figures shown here are net of census under coverage. So they are about 3 or 4% lower than the gross population figures that you would see in those documents. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the study included the calculation of citywide DCs as well as the calculation of area-specific development charges in 2 areas. So we have the northern boundary expansion lands shown here in yellow, and then the Tudela Heights area shown here in green. Next slide, please. So now I'll just get right into an overview of our DC capital programs. So the general services capital programs we'll chat about first. And these were developed in close consultation with city staff, Really the key data source here was the 2021 to 2030 capital plan, as well as discussions with finance as well as service area staff. The DC eligible costs are adjusted in accordance with the legislation, so we make adjustments to account for any anticipated grants, subsidies, and contributions, as well as in some cases Brant County shares, benefit to existing road replacement elements, available DC reserve funds, as well as what we're calling other development related benefit shares. So those are based on our service level restrictions as per the Development Charges Act, as well as other benefiting horizon considerations. So I'll get into that a little bit on the next slide. Just moving on. So our total general services capital program, so again, 2021 to 2030, the total gross costs add up to $273 million. And so we've accounted for a total of about $44 million in grant subsidies and other recoveries here, which also in many cases accounts for Brant County share project costs. We also account for benefit to existing or replacement shares, totaling about $68 million. So those are also deducted from the DC calculation. And then our remaining amount is considered to be development related, but not all of it is picked up through the DC calculation. So first off, we have what we call prior growth shares. So those are shares of projects that have been funded previously through DC. So we have a few major projects that have been ongoing for some time and have been funded partially by DCs already. And it also accounts for currently available DC reserve balances, which we've applied to projects occurring earlier in our planning period. And then there's the other development related category. So these are costs that are in excess of the DC funding envelopes, which are set by our historical funding envelope caps, historical service level caps, sorry, or other shares of project costs that we have determined to not be related to development occurring before 2030. So as an example, in our Parks and Recreation capital program, we have the Southwest Community Center project. That project is anticipated to meet the city's rec facility needs going out to 2035. And so accordingly, a large portion of the project has been removed from the DC calculation and will be considered through future DC updates as we move closer to that time frame. So in total, the other development related category adds up to about $30 million. So once we make those deductions, we're left with the 2021 to 2030 development related and DC eligible amount, which totals about $108 million. Again, much more detail with specific projects and costs is all available within the background study. Next slide, please. And then I'll just move right into the engineered services capital programs. So these are really based off of the new master servicing plan and transportation master plan, and they were primarily set through our earlier ASDC study process. Since that time and since passage of the ASDC bylaw, there were really minimal changes to the Northern Boundary Expansion Lands and Tutuila Heights capital programs. We really just made a few refinements that were made as the MSP and TMP were finalized. And once again, the eligible costs are adjusted in accordance with any anticipated grants or subsidies, or in many cases, we have anticipated direct developer contributions. Again, benefit to existing or replacement, reserve funds, and other development related shares going beyond 2051. Next slide, please. So this is the citywide engineered services capital program. So this really represents engineered projects with broad citywide benefit. So most of our roads projects fall under this category because roads is sort of more so planned for on an overall population and employment growth basis. And those benefiting areas can be more difficult to define. So most of our roads projects fall under this broad citywide category. When we're looking towards the other services of water, wastewater, and stormwater, in the citywide category, we're mostly just dealing with plant upgrades with broad benefit and citywide studies like our future master servicing plan updates. So we've calculated citywide DCs on this basis, and those citywide DCs are layered on top of the area-specific DCs that I'll get to in a minute. So in this case, the citywide engineered services capital program totals $376 million. And then once I make all of the adjustments that I talked about, we arrive at about $286 million that's carried forward to the DC calculation, and that's applied to that sort of 30-year growth to 2051. And then moving on to the next slide. And then here we also have a capital program for the area that we're referring to in the study as citywide excluding ASTC areas. So these are projects with slightly more localized benefit that's not attributed to the northern boundary expansion lands and Two Little Heights areas, but is attributed to other areas in the city. So developments in those two ASTC areas to the north and south will not be subject to the DCs calculated on this basis. This capital program does not include any roads projects, so those are largely considered to be truly citywide in nature, but it does include primarily linear water and wastewater infrastructure, as well as some stormwater projects. And with that, I'll move on to the next slide. And then here we've summarized our capital programs for the two ASTC areas. So not getting into this in a lot of detail, because like I've said, really the changes have been quite minimal when we're talking about projects that relate specifically to those two areas. And we have a lot of background in previous meetings on that. And then moving on, I'll just get right into our rate calculations. So first off, we have the calculated citywide DC rate. So this includes that citywide capital program, as well as the what we're calling the citywide excluding ASTC areas capital program. So those are both factored into the calculation of these rates. So, and this also, as a bit of a side note, includes the city's current parking charge. So due to recent legislative changes, parking is no longer going to be an eligible DC service. However, the city can continue to collect for parking DCs until September of 2022 as a transitional period. So we do add those into our total rates just to give an accurate picture of what those total rates add up to be. So our citywide rates are calculated at $38,400 or so per single or semi-detached unit. For rows or multiples, we're looking at about $27,000 a unit, just over $20,000 a unit for large apartments, and just under $17,000 for small apartments. And you can see sort of at that pie chart to the right that a lot of the charge is related to our engineered services as well as parks and recreation and housing. And then on the next slide, we have our non-residential rate, which is calculated at $88.54 per square meter. And this is more heavily weighted towards the engineered services. And that's because we don't charge for services like Parks and Rec, library, housing, and childcare, which are more considered to be primarily related to residential development only. And then on our next slide, we have a comparison of the citywide current versus calculated residential rate. So here we're showing that we have an increase of about $14,300 per single detached unit. Most of that is related to the general services, with about $4,500 or so related to the engineered services. And you can see our parking charge at the top there as well. It's factored in. And then on the next slide, our non-residential rate increase is about $8.71 per square meter. Again, much more information available within the background study. And then moving on to the next slide. So this is our area-specific charge for the northern boundary expansion lands. Rolling in the applicable citywide charges, as well as the parking charge again. We're looking at just over $56,000 per single or semi-detached unit, going down to $24,500 or so for a small apartment. And the breakdown is shown in the pie chart to the right, our engineered services versus kind of the citywide general services there. And then on the next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. The non-residential rate for the Northern Battery expansion lands totals just over $151 per square meter. And then just moving on. So now we have our current versus calculated area specific charge, again, rolling in the citywide charge for the Northern Battery expansion lands. So our previous charge was the calculated ASDC with the previous citywide charges rolled in. So with our current calculations, we're looking at an increase of close to $6,200 per single detached unit. And then next slide, please. And then on the non-residential side, we're actually looking at a bit of a decrease of close to $22 per square meter. And then we'll just move on to the next slide for the Tutuila Heights summary. Our charges are ranging from over $48,000 per single or semi-detached unit to just over $21,000 per small apartment. And then moving on. And then our non-residential rate is adding up to about $141 per square meter. And then on the next slide. So the difference here in the Tutuila Heights area is about $9,300 per single detached unit. And then finally on the next slide, again, the non-residential rate in Tutuila Heights is declining by about $7.78 per square meter. And then moving on, please. Okay, and then finally, as per usual, we have included a bit of a rate calculation just to see where we stand in terms of some of Brantford's more direct competitors, as well as some comparable municipalities with sort of similar area-specific rate structures. So here I've tried to highlight Brantford's current and calculated charges in green or sort of turquoise there. So you can see when we look at the calculated citywide charge, we're coming in a little bit higher than Brant County's current total charge in terms of single attached units. The area specific charges, both in the Northern Battery expansion lands and Tutuila Heights, are looking kind of comparable to what we see currently in Windsor's Sandwich South area, which is also sort of a greenfield area specific charge. Also kind of similar to Cambridge, as well as area specific charges in Hamilton. And then on the next slide, we have a similar comparison on the non-residential side. So kind of similarly, we're looking at citywide charges that are a little bit higher than Brant County's current charges. And then the area specific charges are actually a little bit lower than Windsor Sandwich South area charge. And then moving on. So that really concludes my presentation. So in terms of next steps, we do have several weeks or so to receive and respond to any comments. We'll assess those and revise the background study and the bylaw as appropriate. And then our target date for bylaw passage is October 26th, and that'll be for both the combined citywide and area specific charges. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. So now's the time to ask any questions you have, Julia. So Councillor Martin, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In your area specific charges, you showed maps of the areas that they apply to. They didn't include the trigger lands. What's the reason for that?
Through the mayor, I think I might need some staff assistance on that. I'm not as close to the development forecasts and the inclusion of the lands and those boundaries.
Alan Waterfield, manager of long range planning. The trigger lands aren't situated within the settlement area boundary, so they're designated agricultural in the new official plan. So the development charges that are being collected on new urban development aren't collected in those areas at this time.
So even though those lands will come into the settlement area at some time before 51, I'm guessing, they're still not considered for the development charges?
The development charge bylaw is updated every 5 years. So as those lands would be brought into the settlement area boundary, then they could also be brought into the development charge bylaw.
Okay, and the non-res decrease in the areas, what's the reason for the decrease?
Yeah, through the mayor. So a couple of reasons to highlight. So if you were to look at our rate comparisons, you would see that a lot of the increase in the residential rate is coming from services like parks and recreation and housing that are charged just on the residential growth and not on the non-residential growth. Another reason is just changes in the development forecast. So this is really a major overhaul of the city's DCs on the basis of all of the policies and plans that have come forward recently. And so there have been changes to the development forecast as well as obviously the capital programs. In terms of the development forecast, we are forecasting a bit of a higher rate of industrial development this time around. And so industrial development is essentially it's associated with a higher what we call floor space per worker. And that employment density has a direct impact on the rate calculation because it is the per square meter charge is really based on employment density.
Okay, but the non-residential, it didn't take into consideration parks and rec type services before, did it?
No, it did not.
Okay, so why, I still don't understand why there was a decrease in those areas.
It just has to do with the rate of increase in those charges that are only charged to residential.
Okay, thank you.
I'm assuming you want me to speak, Mr. Mayor. I'll do that, and you can figure out your tech issues on that side. Through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mute Mayor, to Julia. One of your early slides showed the population estimate, I would say, of 103,000 in the city of Brantford. And I'm just wondering, is that that couldn't be a census number that's just come back? Where are we getting that number, and how close is it to being a reality?
It's through the mayor. Yes, that is an estimate. I maybe should have rounded those numbers because they're obviously not exact in our model. We do not have the 2021 census information yet, and so our forecasts are based off of the growth plan, MCR, official plan, data from staff, and so those rates of growth kind of come from that background material, and so we do try to use numbers on a census year basis, but at the time of the next DC study, then certainly that figure will be updated to reflect the census information.
So let's say, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Julia. Let's say there's a 10 or a 20,000 person difference in the estimate that you have on your charts and what we're currently seeing in Brantford County. How does that skew your numbers starting from a different point?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I don't think we would see a differential of that significant. So, I mean, it's a bit of a complicated question, but DC studies essentially are really based off of the best information that we have at the time, and we think that this is sort of it. There is a bit of a natural correction that happens with future DC studies. So if we see, say, slower growth or faster growth, that would have implications on how quickly the city is spending money on new infrastructure, growth-related infrastructure, and that naturally kind of accounts for that. So that's definitely recognized in the legislation. Of course, we try to use the best information that we have, and we try to make sure that the forecasts are as accurate as they can be. But yeah, certainly we could see those changes.
Okay, thank you very much, Julia. Great report, thank you.
So does anybody else have any questions? Not seeing any. So we had no registered members of the public to participate in the public hearing. So I'll now ask the consultants and staff, are there any additional statements of clarification before the items debated that you'd like to make? Is that it, Joelle?
Sorry, my voice wasn't working there for a minute. Staff have nothing else to add to what the consultant has presented this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Joelle. So the public hearing is now closed. It's council's intention to consider passage of the bylaw, which deals with the development charges described in this meeting at the council meeting scheduled for October the 26th, 2021. So now ask Councillor Martin if you would please move item 5.1.
Thank you. I move seeking a seconder, that report 2021-588, titled 20.
Right, Councillor Vanderstel seconded.
Thank you. Titled Development Charges Background Study, Statutory Public Meeting, Proposed Development Charge Rates and Bylaw be received, and B, that bylaw to adopt Chapter 261 and repeal Chapter 262 of the City of Brantford Municipal Code be presented to City Council for adoption.
Thank you. So any discussion on item 5.1? Seeing none. Julie, would you please take the vote?
Item 5.1 carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstel, Celeste, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, and Carpenter.
Thank you. So I'll now hand the chair back to Councillor Carpenter, who will complete the remainder of the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the committee, we have received 2 delegations for tonight's agenda. I'll now ask Dave McNeil, President, CEO, and Paul Emerson, Chair, Board of Directors of the Brant Community Healthcare Center, to come forward, speak to item 8.1 regarding Brant Community Healthcare System redevelopment. Please state your names, your addresses, and speak to the item. You've got 10 minutes inclusive of questions of the committee. Thank you.
I'll get Paul to start.
Okay.
Unmute and video. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having us, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, and members of council. With me tonight is Dr. David McNeil, who's our president and CEO, and my name is Paul Emerson. I'm the chair of the board of directors. I believe in your package you have an annual report and a written report, And tonight, David's going to make a short PowerPoint presentation highlighting some of those things. But I wanted to say a couple of quick words. One, dealing with the financial status. After years of deficits, and you're probably well aware of that, and the subsequent debt associated with those deficits, we are well on our way to achieving financial stability. And we have to thank the province and the diligent work of David and his team and the staff for getting there. And David will explain in more detail, but we have a surplus this year of over $12 million. So that's pretty good. Ontario Health Teams, our mission is to work with other community partners to provide healthcare to the community. And we're committed to working with the Ontario Health Team, the Brantford Brant Health Team. And we have done that and are helping to, through David and others, play a leadership role in that regard. And finally, I just want to talk about the pandemic quickly. After all these months, that the hospital has fared pretty well. And that's because of the hard work of the staff and the physicians and everybody else associated. I know the fourth wave is here now, and like everybody else in our society, our staff are really feeling the pinch. And but we also want to thank the city for allowing us to be part of your emergency management team. That was wonderful that you pulled that together, and we really appreciated being part of it. So David, I'm going to turn it over to you now for your PowerPoint.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, Council. My name is David McNeil. I'm the President and CEO of the Brant Community Healthcare System. As Paul has mentioned, over the next 12 to 18 months, we will continue to have a focus on our financial health of the Brant Community Healthcare System. As Paul has mentioned, we ran a significant surplus this year, and this was a result of a working capital injection from the government of Ontario. And it reduced our working capital deficit from a staggering $26 million to now $13 million. This fiscal year, we're planning a surplus, and the next fiscal years, we have plans for running surpluses, which will create a very financially sustainable organization. By March 2022, the board will also consider the plan to renew the electronic medical record at the Brant Community Healthcare System. This is a significant undertaking. By October of this year, very exciting, is that we will be issuing the RFP for a new second CT scanner. We anticipate, if all goes well with COVID, that this new CT scanner will be up and operational by June of 2022. Next slide, please. This next slide shows the Ministry of Health planning process. Where the circled stage is stage 3. That's where we are with our emergency department redevelopment. We are just waiting approval from the Ministry of Health to move to stage 4, which is the tender document development. For the redevelopment of the overall hospital, we're at the pre-capital submission, and that's the green box to the far left of your screen. In February of 2020, the Brant Community Healthcare System Board approved the pre-capital submission. This pre-capital submission was developed with significant input from our community leaders, including Mayor Davis. In September of 2020, the Ministry of Health Capital Branch informed the hospital that they had no further questions on our pre-capital submission and that it had been forwarded to government for political prioritization. We've been working tirelessly with our MPP, Will Boma, who's been extremely supportive of the hospital, to get approval to move forward with the next stage of planning, which is stage 1 of planning. This is a significant need for this community. Next slide, please. Just to orient you to the slide, the bottom of the slide and this one represents the Terrace Hill. As you know, our emergency department redevelopment is occurring in 2 projects. The first project will create new space. Anything in color represents new space for emergency department, and that's developed in project 1. Next slide, please. Project 2 will then be a multi-phase project that will renovate the entire remaining emergency department, and it will occur over multiple phases. Brantford will have a new modern emergency department that will meet the needs of our community well into the future and have the future potential for expansion. In the far right-hand corner of the screen, you will see a blue section shaded area. Adjacent to that is a small gray section. That is where a new second CT scanner will go. You can see it's a very well integrated plan. Next slide, please. We've been so fortunate to have great leadership from our Dr. Sarangan Youthalingam, Dr. Letha Lingham has renewed our pediatric service. We now have 24/7 access to pediatrics on site. As well, our pediatricians run an acute care referral service that see patients immediately and follow up from the emergency department or from primary care. Next slide, please. It is our plan by the end of this fiscal year to make sure that we are commencing construction for new space to help service better our pediatric patients here at the Brant Community Healthcare System. Next slide, please. This slide represents the site plan for the Brant Community Healthcare System well into the future. The vertical thoroughfare running up and down on this slide represents St. Paul Avenue. Anything in red represents existing building that will be retained. Some of it will be renovated, but most of that building that is there is being retained because there has been redevelopment done in that building already. Anything in blue represents new construction. This goes across the street of Terrace Hill into the parking lots and lands adjacent to the hospital. These are lands that we're looking to acquire. We've acquired land surrounding the hospital in the last year and some residences, and we are in discussions with property owners related to further purchasing of properties. This is an urgent need for our community. We are at capacity as a hospital. Planning for the future of Brantford, as well as Brant County and the healthcare needs of our community is urgent. And we're looking forward to council support. Paul, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, David, for that presentation. I'd like to echo your comments about our member, Willem Boom. We knew that Willem has been doing everything he can at Queen's Park. And that brings us to this presentation tonight. In your council package, I believe you have a draft motion. We would ask that you support that motion and assist us in continuing to advocate to get some money so we can move forward with the next stage on this badly needed new hospital for our region. And with that, Councillor Carpenter, Mr. Chair, I would turn it back to you.
Thank you. And we do have questions of members of the committee. Councillor Sless, you're first.
Thank you, Councillor Carpenter. First, the CT scanner coming in, is that a replacement or is that in addition to?
It's in addition to, it's a second CT scanner.
Okay, and we have staffing to operate that, do we?
Yes.
Okay, then project 1 and 2, I think, as you described them, those are internal reconfigurations. That's not new building above and beyond the existing footprint. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, then your anticipated expansion, I think it showed in blue. Does that catch us up to where we should be today, or does that get us up into the future where we should be? We just had a presentation on how fast the city is growing. And my concern is that by the time we build this, it will be obsolete. It's kind of like building the QEW or the 401. By the time they get the new lanes in, it's already jammed and you need more lanes. So I'm looking at this as through that same lens and saying, by the time all of this, because it's very time consuming, and I appreciate it, and we've had discussions about how long this takes for approvals. By the time we get the approvals and have the infrastructure and the buildings in the ground and up and running, are we already at a point where we need additional space because we've grown into and out of the new space that we've created?
Yeah, so the sizing of the building is based on Ministry of Finance population projections to 2041. The part of the issue is Ministry of Finance, but we have to use that in the pre-capital submission. The importance of moving this forward to stage 1 is the ministry would allow us to consider things like what the city is seeing in terms of its population growth projections, which are different than the Ministry of Finance. So to answer your question, at this stage by 2041, yes, the facility would probably be too small to meet the needs of the community by 2041, and the urgent need for us to move forward with stage 1 so that we can begin planning in a much more thorough way around what the overall requirements are going to be. So the ministry always gives us the ability to plan 20 to 25 years out.
Okay, and just finally, if I could, Mr. Chair, can you help me answer for folks that call me and they say, listen, I watch City Council. I know there's about 20 high-rise buildings in the pipeline that are going to be built in the next short while in this city. We see all this new land coming into the city. We see what you folks are doing as far as getting that zoned and getting that ready to come online. We see what's going on out in Shellards Lane. And back in the 80s, when we had 70,000 people, we had 2 hospitals. Today we have 1. And how do you answer that as the professionals running these institutions? What do you say to folks that look at that and they go, my gosh, how are we ever going to get caught up?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to get caught up. I mean, some of the planning should have been done sooner. We are at capacity. We're running 99%, 100% capacity every day. This is urgently needed in terms of our community and our community growth. I can't emphasize more strongly around how urgent the need is for us to be able to proceed with planning. Every day counts here because this community is growing. The facilities are stressed. I'm not going to underestimate how stressed our facilities are as we speak today. We have filled both the Brantford site as well as the Willett site. And so, yes, there is a need for us to be concerned if we do not get approval to move forward with planning on an urgent basis.
And just finally, Mr. Chair, could you please pass along to your staff and all your frontline people that are out there working every day, trying to get us through what we're going through right now, the thanks from the city. I'm sure I speak for everybody on council that you folks have done one heck of a great job. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah, we'll be sure to extend that on. And, you know, that really is a testament to our frontline staff who've, their resilience has been amazing. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Councillor Celeste. Well, we're going to go a little over time on this subject matter because it's very important to the city. So if the committee indulgence, Councillor Van der Stout, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Carpenter. Much appreciated. I echo Councillor Celeste's comments. Thank them all for what they do every day on the tough days, the tougher days, and the toughest days. Thank them every day from us. Paul or David, let's say the Ministry of Finance is working from the 103,000 person estimate for the city of Brantford today. And the numbers are skewed, the numbers are off. There's actually more people in the city of Brantford County Brant than we expected, and census numbers bring that out. Will they, or are we in a position to make sure that they understand what the new census numbers are and what the new projections are, and therefore a new calculation on their behalf to better support our community? Do you need our assistance with that, or is that something that's just going to happen naturally?
No, when we get to this state, if we get approval to move to stage 1, we will have to engage very aggressively the city planners in particular around their population projections, because the ministry will always go back to the Ministry of Finance, but they will consider population projections from cities and counties, the city and the county, as we move forward with our planning efforts. So it's going to be really important that we have full engagement of our city planners as we're moving forward into this next stage. This next stage of planning sets the foundation for the other phases. Once we've sized this building in stage 1, everything else after that is just what's getting filled into that building space based on the population that's going to be served and the services that are required to service that population and their space requirements. Okay.
All right. Thank you. If there's anything we can do to assist, please let us know. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you, Councillor Van der Stout, and thank you, David and Paul. I appreciate what you're doing, and certainly thank you to all the frontline staff, workers dealing with COVID. Our thoughts are with them every day. We're thinking about them all the time. So please pass that. Oh, Mayor Davis, you want to speak? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Carpenter. Through to David. In respect to the question Councillor Celeste asked you, which is, so, the building that gets column H, I think, in your diagram, which is across the street from the current hospital. So you're moving to the next stage. You'll be allowed to take into consideration the city's growth projections. And let's say that causes the planning committee to determine, oh, we need more space to meet the need out to 2051, let's say. Do you believe you'd be able to accommodate that on the current site using the vision you created or your teams created? And if so, how would that be done?
Yeah, so I think there's the answer to the question is yes, based on the current location, we feel that we could allow for that planning to be done, and the siting would allow for future expansion. So for example, a cancer center we've sort of mapped out where a cancer center could go on this site as we think about the needs of the community. Why do members of the community have to be traveling to Hamilton for some of the services that they receive, like radiation therapy, et cetera? So we've considered those things. We're talking about a significantly larger facility still than what we have here today. And there is capacity for future planning on the siting as we've located it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And we will be debating this shortly, right after our next delegation. You'll be first on the list. So thank you. I will now ask JL and Epsilon Production to come forward and speak to item 7.11. That's the Brantford Mixed Doubles Curling Classic Tournament. Okay, go ahead. You have 10 minutes inclusive of questions.
Thanks, everyone. Just a couple things. Thank you for having me on this evening. I'm here to talk about a curling event that's currently coming to Brantford in December. I know that it was put in a report for everyone, so I kind of want to give you a bit of a background on it. I've been running these events since about 2007, so this isn't the first time that I've been in front of City Council to ask for the city's help in terms of promoting this event. I ran the Masters Grand Slam in 2012, and then the Men's Provincial Championships in 2016. Both of those events were televised nationally through Sportsnet and CBC. This event isn't going to be any different. CBC has agreed to pick up this event. The first couple of days, they're going to pick it up, and it's going to be streamed on their web service. And then the last 2 days, when we get into the championship round, we will be going to national coverage on their network. So what that means for the city is the production trucks come in, and it'll be hosted by Mike Harris and some of the other announcers that CBC has put forth. So we're just finishing up the negotiations with that. This event that we're bringing is a little bit different than the events that I'd run before. The events that I ran before were 4-on-4. This is mixed doubles. So this game's actually moving quicker than the other events did in terms of speed of play. It's the next big thing, I guess we could say, with curling. Given our track record from 2007 moving forward with these events, the best curlers in the world are coming back to Brantford in December for a few reasons. One, I curled competitively for the better part of 20 years, so I've met these people. So they know that they're going to be coming to a first-class facility in the Gretzky Center, and a first-class event that's run by not only myself, but Wayne Tuck and Curling Canada as a whole. The previous two events that we ran at the Gretzky Center ran seamlessly. We know the lay of the land. It works to television simply because the lights have been upgraded there, so we don't need to bring in. One of the events, we had to bring in lights from Victoria, BC. We don't need to do that now because of the amount of lumens that are in the Gretzky Center. It's a good fit. The idea behind having the arena for this year's event is this year's event is giving 2 berths to the Olympic trials. So somebody that is coming from this event is going to the Olympic trials that will eventually wear the maple leaf and represent Canada in China at the Olympics. So that was one of the reasons that it was of an interest to me to take it on, is because of those the 2 Olympic berths. We've also run this before. So when Curling Canada gets into a bit of a pinch, they end up calling us because we have been able to pull these events off in a short period of time. This isn't one of them. So when I go in front of council to ask for permission, basically, and for council support on this, I referenced the 2 reports that were produced in both 2012 and 2014. And then I'm referencing the report that was produced for this event. And there are some stark contrasts. I want to make sure that I have this event here. I was born and raised in Brantford. I'm a 4th generation Brantfordian. So it's important for me. But when I look at this report, I was hoping that maybe the other 2 reports would have been referenced so they know exactly what it is that I've been asking for, because the ask isn't any different. What I'm reading here is very different. Not only lost revenue generated to the point of 23,000, but lost revenue anticipated for 20,000. I've never seen these numbers before. Additional staffing expense of 4,700. there are a few discrepancies that I would like to have clarified, so I know exactly what it is that I'm asking for, because years previous, I've never seen any of this. In this report, it's saying that there's an modest economic impact event of 29,000. When I first read that, I thought it was actually a typo, because the years previous, in 2012, it was estimated to be over 300,000 and based on overnights, community spending, ticket revenues, and hospitality. Then in 2016, it was 439,000. So I'm not sure when I look at this report and it's 29,000. So I apologize for that, but hopefully we can have some clarification that there is a higher number than 29,000. I did some quick math that we have 70 competitors for 4 nights at an average cost of $135 a night. That's $37,800 in rooms alone for the competitors. So I'm not sure where these numbers have come from. I've also seen in here that they wanted to charge me to third party out $10,000 for a third party to remove the glass partitions and raise the netting. In 2012 and 2016, I watched city staff do that. So I don't know why we would want to outsource that when it's something that can be done in-house. Also, that there were some fees that were included in here. Caretakers and custodial staff, arena attendant, supervisor for 12 hours a day, and then a second arena attendant. I'm not sure why you would want to charge an event when that staff is already on staff. Why would you want to charge an event? I've put a call into Draft Day to find out what it is that they have been paying to host special events. But if I was to host events, but I knew that I was going to be displaced user groups in a cost of $20,589, I'd like to have it clarified as what displaced is. I think it's in the contract of anybody that's a user group at the Gretzky Center that they could be displaced due to special events. I would like to think that this is one of them. So if I could get some clarification from staff as to why that is, I would appreciate it. That third party cost was $10,500. I don't really understand. So when I come to council and ask for the support of the city, I'm not sure where these numbers have come from. I know that there has been some changes, but I apologize that you guys are seeing these numbers because this was a bit of a surprise to me. I hope that I can still receive the help from the city. I would really like to host this event here in my hometown. If anybody has any questions about the type of competitors that are coming, the quality that's going to be here, the television coverage, the clubs that I involve, I'd be more than happy to open up the floor to answer any questions.
Is that your presentation, Jay? We do have questions.
Yeah, and I don't. When I watched the previous report, I don't have fancy pie charts. I've done this a few times, so I kind of know what it is that I'm doing, and I've never run into this before with anything that I've actually tried to bring in. Even last year, there was a support of the city for $5,000, and that was for in-ice logos at the curling clubs, because I think it's important that the city is advertising the Brant Curling Club. Those logos are sitting in a storage room currently waiting to be put into the ice. So I hope that happens.
Okay, Jay, we'll go to questions from members of the committee, and we'll have the debate. When it's debates, we can ask staff those questions.
Perfect.
Mayor Davis, you're first.
Yeah, good evening. Thanks very much, Jay. So the question for you, if this generates a profit, who keeps it?
It doesn't generate a profit. I've been doing this for almost 15 years. I've never had a profit of 1 cent. I've never made any money from this.
What if it does?
I would donate it to charity.
So it would go to you then?
No, it would go to a charity.
All right, but you would have the legal right to the profits. Is that correct? It's a private event?
Yeah, if you wanted to look at it that way. That question's never been posed, Mary Davis. I've never had a profit. Any of the profits that I've ever had, I usually have a charity of choice.
Yeah. Another question for you. CBC, do you have a written commitment from them that they'll cover it?
No, back and forth. I would not say that I did one way or the other. The problem with CBC, and it's not really a problem, is we had to make sure that the dates were conducive of not competing with Nordic downhill and figure skating. Now that we have those dates, and those were a bit of a moving target simply because of COVID, they weren't sure if they were having those events or not. Once that agreement is signed, then I would be more than happy to produce it for city staff. if CBC isn't online, Mayor Davis, there's no reason to have the arena. Like, I want the arena for the competitors to get them ready to play in the event that's for the trials. But if we don't need to have television cameras in there, I'm not really sure we need the arena.
Where would you hold it then?
3 curling clubs.
All right. And so when are you going to know whether or not CBC will commit to coverage?
Within the next couple of weeks, that's what I'm hoping to have. It was tough to get in touch with them when they were in Tokyo at the Olympics. So now that they're back, everything's settled down. It's been a few weeks. We've been back and forth, but the producers that I've been dealing with, there has been some vacation time. So I got to try and honor that as best I can.
All right. And have you made any attempt to do your own calculations as to the economic benefit for the city of Brantford?
No, my own calculations as to what the benefit is for the city.
Yeah.
How would I even go about that, Mayor Davis?
Another question for you. So let's say CBC shows up. How are we going to get coverage? I'm talking about we, meaning the city of Brantford. How and where do we get the coverage that would promote the city?
No, yeah, great question. So in my talks with the producers, there is a lot of B-roll footage that CBC comes in weeks previous. The previous event that we ran with Sportsnet, they would come in a week before. If there was footage of the armories, some of the statues of the city, they do the same thing for the Scotty Tournament of Hearts, as well as the Briar and the host cities, where they run an expose on the city itself. That would be the same for this event. The Grand Slam does the same thing, where they talk about the cities that they're in. And then I have talked to the city staff about producing some of the videos that the CBC would be able to use to promote the city that this event is in.
Okay, thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Toski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Jay. And hopefully we can get some clarification to some of your concerns later. My question to you would be, in the report, it refers a lot to the 4 years and, would like to, and, you really want to have it in Brantford. But if this were to be approved, are you contracted to have it for 4 years, or is it just, I anticipate, or I'd like to be there?
No, good question. A little bit of both. I think when Curling Canada asks us to run these events, they know that we can host them here. If I asked them to produce a contract for it to be here for the next 4 years, absolutely, they would do it.
And would you be willing to do that?
I have agreed to, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Toski. Councilor Wall.
Jay, thanks. I'll make sure that your staff or your questions are asked to staff when we have the opportunity. My question for you is, we're not the only municipality having something like this, especially if we're trying to get people to go to the Olympics. So what's going on in other communities? What's best practices? What's your experience with their partnerships with municipalities or their commitments?
My experience with them is playing in them, not organizing them. So I don't know what the ins and outs are. And I do know that a lot of these events have been in Portage, Manitoba. One of the reasons we have the event this year is because Portage, Manitoba was sponsored by a hotel chain. Given what's happened with COVID, they've dropped out, which has allowed us the opportunity to host this event. I don't want to host it for just 1 year. I want to host it for another Olympic run, and that's why I've agreed to do it for as long as I have. So to make comments
This is
on
a unique event?
Well, yes and no. I mean, this is the lead up to the Olympic trials. This is why every team needs to be at this event. This is the last ditch event before the Olympic trials to compete for Canada. That's why we're getting the names that we're getting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wall. And last, Councilor Sless.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Jay.
Thank you.
I attended, I think, something similar to what you're proposing a couple of years ago. I think just before COVID, I was down at the Brant Curling Club, and there was a mixed doubles thing going on there. Is this in that same light as what was going on there?
Yes. Just on a grander scale. There'd be more international teams here. We had more Canadian content for that event. That was 2018, I believe we ran that. But yeah, along the same lines.
Okay, yeah, because from memory, I think there was folks there from China and a number of countries outside of Canada. At least what I experienced when I was down there. It was very well run, and it was very, very well attended.
Thank you.
So-
Yeah, we had 5 teams from China.
Okay, yeah, okay. China stuck out because there seemed to be a lot of Chinese folks playing, and there's only 2 on a team. So
That's
it,
right,
it
yeah.
seemed like they must have had a lot of representation there.
They
Okay,
do.
thanks very much.
Travel with quite an entourage.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slusson. Thank you, Jay. That's our time and then some. So we'll be debating this item shortly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Due to the delegation, we're going to move up item 8.1 to be considered first. Mayor Davis, you have the floor. Please move your item 8.1 and state your seconder.
Yeah, so I'm moving this, read the presentation we just heard, looking for a seconder. I think most of you read. Oh, I see Councillor Sluss got his hand up there. So the resolution is, whereas the current infrastructure deficits of the Brant Community Healthcare System, BCHS, have been identified by the Minister of Health appointed supervisor who was operating the hospital prior to David McNeil being hired. And whereas the current hospital is functioning at or over capacity and will not meet the future needs of the city of Brantford, the county of Brant, Six Nations of the Grand River, Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and whereas there is strong community support for the redevelopment of an improved hospital facility for the BCHS, and whereas the pre-capital submission for redevelopment of the BCHS main hospital facility has been signed off by the Ontario Health, and in September 2020, staff with the Ministry of Health Capital Branch indicated they had no further questions regarding the submission and were awaiting government direction related to prioritization. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Council requests that the Government of Ontario immediately grant permission to BCHS to plan for the redevelopment of BCHS hospital facilities and to also provide the necessary funding to enable the Brant Community Healthcare System move forward with stage 1 of planning for this critically important project. And if I may, Mr. Chair, can I speak to this?
You have the floor, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So having an upgraded hospital facility, it's the number one public project for our community. There's no other project that is more important and essential for maintaining the health and well-being of our community and making our community an inviting prospect for newcomers. It's indisputable that the current hospital facility does not meet the needs of our current population and will in the future be woefully inadequate given the growing population growth the province expects for our area. So working towards obtaining a new hospital, it was an important priority for me when I was Joe Q private citizen, and since becoming mayor, it remains one of my top priorities, as I know it is for many members of council. And I think most residents understand that the city doesn't drive this project, but it comes under provincial jurisdiction. But we have a major role, and especially the mayor, who is expected to advocate and speak out regarding the needs of our city, regardless which government has to meet those needs. So I have been and will continue to be 100% committed to securing a new hospital for our region. So, what is being done? Well, you've heard from David McNeil, the committee that I've been serving on it as well, has been planning. It's been slowed down by COVID because the hospital and people running the hospital had to focus on that. But it's now being reinvigorated, and this stage 1 capital funding request will do that. And this project is being led by the hospital executive and the hospital board members, as it should be. But you know what? They cannot achieve this vision, this dream we have in our community for an upgraded hospital on their own. And they're going to need our help. They're going to need help from everyone in the community. Why? And why is that? Because there are a lot of other Ontario communities that want a new or upgraded hospital facility, and the province only has so much money available for new hospitals. And so we have to speak with a loud and united voice. And this resolution is the beginning of that. And then beyond that, we're going to have to do everything we can to lobby and push for the provincial government to support this initiative. And this resolution I'm putting before you is the beginning of that for our council. And in closing, I want to acknowledge that perhaps there may be some concerns about the proposal we heard this evening, as some people may prefer that we have an entirely new hospital, which would logically be on the outskirts of our city. You know what? I've given this a lot of thought, and I've spent many hours in the planning committee at the hospital hearing the reason why they're moving forward with this. And I got to tell you, there are a number of very good reasons why this makes a lot of sense. And first of all, building on the current site has a lot of pluses. It's centrally located in our city, making it accessible as much as possible to all parts of the city, and especially those who only have access to public transportation. And, you know, I looked to St. Catharines, they built a shiny new hospital almost in Grimsby, and they're now going to have to build a satellite hospital in downtown St. Catharines because many people from the southerly part and the easterly part of St. Catharines, they can't get there. Also, we have a number of members of the public who go to the hospital regularly. They receive treatments regularly, whether it be cancer or it's dialysis, and many of them live around the hospital, and they don't have the ability to get out to the outskirts. And also, building on the current site makes good use of that D-wing that was only built 15 years ago and cost 70 million plus, is still a very modern facility, and this will allow us to make good use of that very expensive wing and not see it just lay in waste because it's abandoned. The other thing that's very convincing to me, and Mr. McNeil didn't mention this, but this is the preferred choice of the Ministry of Health. And that means we get an upgraded hospital, which is really essentially a new hospital. And we're going to get it much more quickly, and we're going to get it more economically because our community has to contribute about 10% of the capital cost. We'll get that in the current site. And so, and as we also heard from Mr. McNeil, the current site has the capacity to meet all future needs of this community. Just if the population projections are larger, they build a bigger building across the street. So there's a lot to be said for this proposal. I think it makes a lot of sense when you work your way through it. I'm hoping this council will support this unanimously. And this is just the beginning of what it is that we as a community and we as a council and we as a city are going to have to do to get ourselves the hospital that we deserve. So hope it has unanimous support. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two in the speaker's queue, Councillor Wall and Councillor Van Tilburg. Councillor Wall, you're up, sir.
Thanks, Councillor Carpenter. A few years ago, the hospital and the staff and the doctors and the nurses, they saved my mother's life. And I don't think there's anybody in this city or even within the boundaries of this region who doesn't have a story or somebody they know that had their life impacted by the staff and the doctors and the nurses and everyone up at the hospital. And I think that anybody who has recently experienced a stay at the hospital has a story or knows somebody who has a story of just how overwhelmed our healthcare system is right now. Not just here, but almost everywhere that you go. And it is crystal clear that we need a bigger hospital, that we need more healthcare support. And I'm committed 100%. Whatever I can do, whoever I can talk to, whatever fundraiser I can support, whatever rallying cry I can add my voice to. The hospital literally saves lives every day. And in the middle of the pandemic, our healthcare workers have put themselves at risk to take care of people, and they don't have what they need. And I don't think that that's a failure of the administration. I think the administration has to do everything that it can with whatever it has to get the job done. But can more be done? Absolutely. And am I happy to support this? Absolutely. Whatever we can do, whenever we can do it, 100% I'm in. And thank you to every human being who puts in an hour of work at that hospital, because our society couldn't function without it.
Thank you, Councillor Wall, for your positive energy. Councillor Van Tilburg.
I will be supporting this motion, particularly when I read those last words. Now, therefore, be it resolved that council requests the government of Ontario immediately grant permission to the BCH to plan for redevelopment of BCH hospital facilities to provide the necessary funding, etc. Look, I thought that that was what we had already debated when we were determining whether we needed a complete whole new hospital or this portion to move forward. You know, the sooner the better. because this city is growing, it's growing fast, and we've already been well aware of the stress and strains of the hospital system. So while I was a person that supported a new hospital, you have to take what's available and what you can get. So I don't believe that there's any reason for the provincial government to slow foot on this. I'm a bit surprised that the mayor actually has to draft a resolution to say, to get their act together and get this done for us. I believe it's been we're heading on 4 years. So I'm happy to support this. I certainly hope that this gets taken seriously by the province, because I really don't know what the timelines are to build a hospital like this. But I am just as concerned as others that have mentioned, where are we going to be in 15 to 20 years? So I believe that this development on the hospital is something that's needed. It's needed, quite frankly, needed now. It was needed yesterday. I know there was a lot of community support in that movement to expand our hospital systems, whether it was a new hospital or whether it was what is provided now. So I'm a little bit puzzled on why they would have to ask permission to go to this next stage in the first place, the stage 1 of planning. And so, as I said, stage 1 of planning, this critically important project, you would just think that this would be happening. So I very much appreciate the mayor's resolution here and fully support it.
Thank you, Councillor Van Tilburg. Councillor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I too would like to thank the mayor for bringing this forward. I think it was 2 years ago, Councillor Utley and I met with Dr. David Neal, and he showed us these plans that we've seen again this evening. And that just demonstrates to me how slow this process works. And it's nothing to do with people not doing their jobs anywhere. I think it's the system is extremely slow. It almost grinds to a halt. The amount of approvals that are required to move a hospital forward, I found flabbergasting. Every little thing you do has to go down to Toronto. It goes through a whole ministerial review. It goes through their finance departments. Then it comes back here, and maybe there was one thing missing. So now the whole process starts all over again. So it's frustratingly slow, but my understanding is that to build a hospital from scratch, and we're probably looking at very similar, because we're almost building a new hospital here, you're close to $1 billion before you unlock that door. And as the mayor indicated earlier, about 10% of that has to be locally raised. So we're looking at locally about $100 million is going to have to be raised within this community to move this whole thing forward. And it's going to take big commitments from industry, from individuals, from the city. It's not something that you can just say, go get him, Mr. McNeil, you can do it, you can do it. No, he can't do it by himself. It's going to take, I think the phrase is a village, and it's going to take the whole city to get behind this effort, because I think everybody in the city has a connection. I think, as Councillor Wall's saying, everybody has a story. Everybody's been connected in one way or another to the Brantford General Hospital. And when we talk about it, we're not just talking, we keep saying the city, the city, the city. It's the area. Brant County feeds into this, and there's another 40 or 50,000 people waiting in line to get in to do something. The size of the county is almost what we were when we had 2 hospitals. And now we're expected to put our growing city along with the growing county into the same existing building that was renovated a few years ago. I guess about 15 years ago. But during that 15 years, the whole southwest of Brantford has exploded into 11 or 12,000 people. So it just keeps, the story just keeps getting more and more scarier. And I think we're doing the right thing by kicking this off, get it started. And I think it takes a while to get this done, but if you don't start somewhere, every journey starts with the first step. And I think pushing this as a city forward, I think is a good thing. And every chance you get to speak to Will Boma, please do, and tell him how badly we need this. I don't think he needs any reminding, but the more he hears it, he might get sick of hearing it and start chewing someone else's ear in Toronto. So just keep pushing this until we have something built. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sluss. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for moving this item forward and for being involved in it from the very beginning. And I think the whole committee recognizes that that this area, Brant, deserves a new hospital, deserves that upgrades that are necessary. And the staff have been working on this for many, many years. And I know Will Boma's already, mayor's already contacted Will Boma. They have a conversation. Maybe the mayor could update council and the public on where we are with this, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, Chair Carpenter. Y- Our MPP, Will Boma, has been on the same committee that I've been on. It's a hospital committee. It's a planning committee. It's been in place now. It was set up well before COVID, and we were moving this along, and said COVID certainly deflected us. But since the spring, I've been working with our MPP, Will Boma, to move this and push this to the Ministry of Health. We arranged a meeting with the Minister of Health, Christine Elliott, in the middle of August. MPP Will Boma attended with me, along with some of the city staff. We had a very receptive audience. However, you have to do more than just one meeting. We have to do resolutions. It's every time I see a cabinet minister, it's pushing it, all of us pushing it with the contacts we have with the province. But more importantly, the community saying clearly, as a community, and it is a region, it's more than just a city, that we need this hospital, we need it as fast as possible, that the hospital planning committee has a great plan to move this forward, and let's start getting it done. And Councillor Sluss is quite right. We're also going to have to think as a community, as a region, how are we going to raise that 100 million? And that's a big commitment, and it'll take the whole community coming together to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good comments at the end that we have to raise that 100 million. And I think this community is, this community being Brantford, we can do that. We're pretty resilient. Okay, I'm going to now call the vote on item 8.1. Madam Clerk.
Item 8.1, Brant Community Healthcare System Redevelopment carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstelt, Sluss, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, and Carpenter.
Thank you. The committee will now consider all the items that were separated for discussion purposes. Councillor Van Tilburg, please read the motion to place all separate items for consideration and consent not previously voted on the floor, and state your seconder, please.
Seeking a seconder that all items for consideration consent 7.1, 7.2 be separated for discussion be approved. Councillor Wall's got his hand up. I couldn't see when the screen went blank.
Okay.
There it is, my ward mate.
Okay, so they're now separated for discussion. We're at 7.11. Can I please get one of the options placed on the floor? Councillor Wall.
Option A.
A is that it be received, I believe.
Sorry?
I believe A is that 7.11, the Brantford Mixed Doubles Curling Classic tournament request for Epsilon production.
So
option A.
Fully funding this request, recognizing that one.
Go ahead.
Sorry, there's three. There's A, B, and C. I'm moving option A.
A is I'm reading there. A is the report to be received.
No, A and okay. Sorry, Councilor. I understand. It's very. There are three options suggested by staff,
right?
And we are supposed to pick one for the blank in B.
Yep.
So I'm moving option A to fill the blank for B. Fully funding this request.
And your seconder?
Seeking a seconder.
Seconded by Councillor Antosky. Discussions.
And I will continue if I may.
Yes, you may.
So three questions for whomever can answer. Jay had mentioned that there were some disparity. I can't even say the word. I apologize. My tongue has got out of my mind. Discrepancies in the economic impact. Then could you elaborate a little bit further on why the third party cost? And then the third question was, it was alluded to that this had been done one way previously when this had happened before, and now it is being done quite differently. And if you could elaborate on why.
Okay, you have the floor.
Hello, this is Ella Stippa Jones, Sport Tourism Coordinator. So with respect to the discrepancy in the economic impact predictive model, in previous events for these curling tournaments, the EI that was, or sorry, the predictive model that was used was based on a single multiplier for participants. So we had looked at that multiplier, and it wasn't differentiating enough between what a local participant, a regional, provincial, or international one. So we did some research into finding different economic impact models. And the one that we came up with was the TREAM model, which is referenced in the report, the Tourism Regional Economic Impact Model that is produced by the province of Ontario. So there are other communities that use this type of model predictor, such as Hamilton, Pickering, and Niagara. So that is what in the fall of 2020, it was approved to move to this type of an economic impact predictive model for tournaments coming in. So that is where the discrepancy, the difference is. If we were to run the 2016 or 2012 event through this model, it would have a lower impact because it differentiates between all the different participants and where they're coming from.
Okay, and then the other two questions. So I'm not familiar with what happened in the past, so I'm just kind of asking this based on what the presenter said. There seems to be a third-party cost associated with the event this time that wasn't the last two times. Could you elaborate on that? And then the final question was, again, why it was done one way before, which kind of sets precedent, and now it is being done completely different.
I'm going to ask Brian Hughes to address this question, please.
Thanks, Ella. Brian Hughes, Director of Park Services, and through you, Mr. Chair. So as you can imagine, I was not involved in the last event many years ago that took place with regard to the curling event. So really can't speak to how it was done differently. What I can speak to is how it's done today and the different factors that affect us in today's model. So as you can imagine, putting together an event of this magnitude will require resources, many resources, and in this case, some resources beyond our abilities. So I believe at the last time the event was held, staff were kind of congregated from other areas of the department. So as they took park staff off grass cutting to come in and try to assist with removing the glass and the various barriers. So they basically tried to congregate as many resources as they can to complete the task. And unfortunately, we're just stretched too thin right now to do something like that. We can't afford to reassign people from other areas, or do we have enough resources in the arenas to undertake this task? Since that time as well, protective netting has been installed above the glass in all the arenas, which complicates the removal of the glass. So you have to bring in specialized equipment to, number one, remove the netting first before you can even get the glass out. Use equipment that we might not necessarily have to remove the glass and then relocate it and store it and so forth. So when we factor in the costs of any kind of special events, we look at the efficiencies and what's best and what's within our means to provide the service. We certainly support special events. We love to host special events, but there are costs associated with special events. And it's our job to analyze these costs, determine the best way to provide the service, whether it be in-house or whether we suggest a third party to come in and do it. And in this case, for the glass removal, that was the recommendation, to have it done by a third party.
I imagine I'm going to run out of time, and I'm asking this question respectfully because I honestly don't understand it. Is it cheaper to get third party in to do it than staff?
Well, in some cases it is. In some cases, staff might not be trained to do it. If there's a requirement to work at height, certain staff might not have that certification to do that. So, and it's just a matter of their staff resource. It takes more than one person. As you can imagine, the staff in arenas are already assigned to work schedules in the arenas we have. So you don't really want to close down another arena just to move staff over to do it. That wouldn't be the most economic way to do it. It would be more economic and more beneficial to our operation to have a third party complete this task.
Okay, I might have more questions, just not right now. Thank you, Brian. And
thank you, Councillor Well. Mayor Davis.
Thank you. I mean, This is through you, Mr. Chair. I mean, it's a great event and Jay's done a lot of work, but at the same time, we are custodians of the public purse. And I have some concerns about this. For the viewers, this is asking to use Gretzky Center for about 9 days. We're going to have groups, minor hockey groups, church hockey, private users. They'll be displaced. We won't be receiving revenue from them that they would normally pay. It excludes any other possible special events during a period of time, early December, that can be quite popular. The Gretzky Center will have to have some staff allocated to this, and those costs total about $60,000. So this is, and no fees being paid to use the facility. That's a big ask. And to my mind, there better be a big benefit to justify it. So, but my first question is to staff. We have many other great sporting organizations in the city. I can think of the swim club that I was involved with many years. We have provincial swim meet, bringing 1,000 people from across the province here, not putting us on CBC, but giving us a lot of exposure, international hockey tournaments. Is it customary that we allow the use of our facilities and not charge any fees for events like that? I don't know, is it? I don't think it is, but what's the usual arrangement?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mayor, no, it's not usual. Usually, most of the tournaments and events that come into our facilities do pay the associated fees. We have fees for tournaments set aside, and we have fees for, obviously, use. So the fees are established in our rates and fee bylaw. They've been approved by council, and generally speaking, users pay the fees. And any associated costs that go above and beyond the fees. So in the example of a tournament, there might be additional costs beyond just using the facility. There could be additional costs in cleaning. There could be additional costs, especially in this day and age, regarding COVID and the regulations surrounding COVID and how we're going to control entry. So I think some of those fees have been incorporated into this cost, because in this day and age, the cost to run an event under the regulations of COVID is not the norm, is not the cost you would normally be associated with. So there are costs to screen people as they come in, to collect contact information and so forth, as well as additional costs in cleaning the facility and keeping it clean and keeping it running. So,
But Brian, I'm really concerned about the precedent. Are we then setting the stage for other groups to say, hey, I'm bringing in hundreds of people from across the province or Canada, and I'd like to be able to use facilities for free?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's certainly a possibility. Or through you, Mr. Chair, sorry, that's certainly a possibility, Mr. Mayor. Yes.
Yeah. Do I have any time left, Chair, or do I have to ask to be put back in a second?
No, you have time left.
Yeah. Okay. So, Jay's done a lot of work in this. I've talked to him about it. It's a great event, but I'm really concerned about the precedent this sets. What it says to other groups that work equally hard for great sporting events, and they pay, proper freight for using city facilities, displacing other groups for a period of 9 days. In my mind, the only way it can possibly justify this is if we're going to get national exposure for our city. And when I asked that question, the answer was not. I think it is, to be fair, to describe it as a maybe, and one that we won't know for a few weeks. So, to my mind, to get my support for this, it's premature. Without the involvement of CBC for those 2 days in the weekend, I won't support it. So I don't know how to deal with that, if it's a delay or how you deal with it. But that's my view without prior to hearing from the rest of the members of council, and they can change my mind.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Antosky, you're next in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The mayor asked some of my questions, but I'm looking for some clarification on a couple of pieces, just because I'm listening carefully to the words that are being said. So I'm hearing most of our tournaments pay their freight, and that's the usual thing. Have we done this for any other tournament? Have we waived the fees?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, we have not. What happens, and council had set up a process a few years back, if you recall, and I'm not sure if it was this council or the previous, where they wanted to direct people that were approaching council to waive fees to the local community foundation and get funding to service them through the local community foundation in order to avoid groups coming to council. Because there was a time, I'm going to say about 5 years ago, when many groups were coming to council for just this purpose, and it was redirected, and we were redirecting them to the community foundation to get support to pay for their event, whether it be a special event or a tournament or such. So that was the direction at that time.
Yeah, you read my mind. I'm very familiar with that committee, Brian. Thank you. Now what's available for the community foundation, you know, even if we get up and running, it's nowhere near what's being asked for here. Is it common across all contracts that they are alerted that they may be displaced? Do organizations know that to be a possibility?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it's a possibility that some organizations understand that they're going to be displaced, but I guess the duration of the displacement, how long they're going to be displaced for. We do get and try to organize tournament applications at the beginning of the year so that we know in advance, and based on our allocation policies, tournaments kind of get first crack at the time they need, and generally those are the tournaments that are reoccurring. They're the annual events that happen year after year. New ones come in, but they get the opportunity at kind of at the bottom of the allocation policy. We fill in all of our regular users and our minor groups first, and then new events get priority kind of after everyone else is settled.
Yeah, it is a longer time, but is it in our contracts with our regular users?
There's definitely through you, Mr. Chair, there's definitely a clause in there that says, you know, we have the right to switch and move times around. I'm not saying that goes over well with all organizations, because obviously they've set their schedules and they have their time, and you know, ICE is of a premium. So
that's fair. Thank you, Brian. And my last question is regarding the revenue numbers. I actually also found those to be low, and that may be because, you know, I'm remembering past models, but I mean, I struggle a little bit with models. I know it's a good tool to have. Do we couple the theoretical models with any of our own information and adjust the models in any way, shape, or form, or is it just too new for us to do that?
Through you, Mr. Oh, sorry, Ella, go ahead.
Councillor Antosky, so we have in the past, we have conducted our own personal economic impact models. We did it for the Gretzky International Tournament. I believe this was back in 2015, I think, 2014, 2015, and also for the Jazz Festival. So we did have just for those specific events. So it gives you a general idea of only for those two. And it was kind of looked towards how to bring them to other tournaments and other events, and it wasn't meeting what we needed it to do. So we needed to get something more specific, which is why we went to the provincial model that will give us backup. We're not just making an educated guess. We're actually working with concrete numbers there.
Okay, thanks, Ella. I'm eager to try and support something like this, especially post-COVID, get our businesses and our restaurants and everything going up. But I may change my mind. I'll listen to what the other councillors have to say. Thank you, Brian and Ella. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Antosky. Councillor Jen Vanderstel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Carpenter. I'm not sure who I should ask this question of, but it seems to me, I know I'm green behind the ears when it comes to curling. I think I peripherally follow it, but we have set a precedent in the past. There have been other tournaments that have occurred at the Gretzky pre-COVID, obviously. And I'm assuming that the costs of running this event now is higher because of COVID. But is there someone who can speak to what our precedent was that we set with the other tournaments that occurred? And it's kind of like a 3-point question. Are we comparing apples to apples? Are the same amount of players, are we looking for the same amount of people to come in from out of town? Was there coverage of previous events, and was it CBC coverage? And the third comparator, of course, is related to the economic benefit to the city of Brantford. Is there somebody who can speak to the other events that have occurred at the Gretzky?
Good evening, Mayor Davis and members of council. Kevin Finney, Director of Economic Development Tourism. I can't specifically speak to the events at the Gretzky Center, in detail with respect to the operations. What I can speak to is what our office has provided in the past historically to some of these events, be it at the Gretzky Center or other locations throughout the city. As Jay did mention, the provincial tankard was held there in 2016. We made a sponsorship of $10,000 through the Economic Development Tourism Marketing Reserve for that event. I believe there were more teams, but I'm not 100% certain on that. In terms of other sponsorships that we've entered into for other events across the city, council will be well aware of the Parasport Games that came to town, roughly 220 athletes and their families. Again, this was a $10,000 sponsorship. And the most recent would be the 55+ Winter Games. So again, this was intended to occur this year. It was postponed due to COVID. We made a sponsorship contribution of $15,000. That will see upwards of 900 athletes coming to the city, along with their families and friends.
Okay, so 10 and 10 and 15 for 3 different events. And that's something that we've done in the past. We could be in a position to do it again should the opportunity arise. But outside of the sponsorship, were all the costs borne and carried by the organizers of those tournaments, or were there additional costs that were waived or proposed to be waived by the municipality?
Again, I might have to ask Brian to come on, but I would say that some of them were probably covered by other corporate sponsors for the larger events, not just the municipality alone. But again, I'm not sure if Brian can provide any further insight on the center itself.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, it was before my time that I was involved in the arena operations, so I'm not really sure. I did briefly read a report, though, back from the 2016 event this afternoon, and it really made no reference to waiving of fees within that report, and did speak to the rental of ice. So I can't say for sure one way or the other, but there was no reference of it in the report that I read that fees were waived.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'll listen to what everybody has to say, but in Councillor Sless's words, I'll be interested to see how I vote on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Anderson. Councillor Sless, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there's a few terms that are being kind of thrown around, and they're being thrown around a little too loosely. We keep talking about tournaments. Tournaments can be 10 girls softball teams playing out at Lions Park. That's a tournament. Okay, this is not on that level. This is qualifying for the Olympic Games. Okay, so this is major stuff. I'll confess, I watch some of this stuff on TV because I enjoy watching it. That's why I was down at the Brant Curling Club the last time they had a very similar event down there. Although it wasn't the same magnitude as what we're talking here. This is much larger. So I think when we're talking about national exposure, that's exactly what this is. The Gretzky tournament, hockey tournament at Christmas, is a huge event, but it's not national exposure. That's not televised coast to coast in Canada or elsewhere. It's simply a big tournament within our community, which is a very good thing, but it's not, again, on the same scale as what you're talking about here. This is international. There's teams from all over Europe. These folks don't travel one guy with a suitcase. They come with an entourage. So there's a lot of people coming in for this, forgetting all the broadcasters, the technical crews, and all of the stuff that it takes to put something on television. It's a big deal. It's a huge deal. So to call it another tournament is totally erroneous, because it's not. You're not comparing apples to apples. It's not remotely close. They both might have the same name, but they don't have the same connotation. It's totally different. So I would just caution people not to get hung up on the word tournament, because it's not the same thing. I think to cover the mayor's concern, I think it would be prudent about the national exposure, because I think that's for me a very huge component to this. I think this thing could get approved subject to confirmation of the television networks coming here and promoting this coast to coast. And I can tell you again, from watching on TV, it's very upfront and personal. When you watch it on TV, the city logo of the host city is front and center when you're watching curling, because every every movement that happens comes down that ice, and right at the end of that ice is the great big logo of that city. So I guess the message of where it's coming from is constantly reinforced, constantly. And what they do, and I think Mr. Allen explained it briefly, but they show you clips of the cities that it's happening in. And you, in here, you would get shots of the Grand, you would get shots of the outside of the Sanderson Center, of the, probably inside as well, but also the Gretzky Center, which is something I think this community is rightfully proud of. So those types of things are all put on display for the rest of the nation to look at. And it's can you quantify that? Probably not. But I think, I forget the numbers now. I thought it was 23,000 would be the net benefit to the city in activity. As Mr. Allen said, the number of people coming times $135 for a room for a night is $30-some thousand. That's not counting restaurants and all the rest of it that goes with all of this. So I think having just come through COVID, and now you go out to the hotel chains and you say, listen, we can fill your place up for a week, for 9 days, for 2 weeks almost. We can fill your place up. And we can go to the restaurants and say, you know what, Montana's, you're going to be full for the next however many days, almost 2 weeks. When you start doing those kind of things, there's a huge, huge impact to the city. Does that money come directly into the city's pockets? No. But those people pay their taxes directly into the city's pockets. And those folks that work there spend their money at the mall, and they spend their money around the city as well. So the ripple that takes place in something like this happening in our community is huge. A lot of it not seen, but huge. So I would hope people would support this. If nothing more, this city lacks pride in itself. We seem to always have a negative view of our own city, and we shouldn't, because we've got a lot to be proud of in this city. And this is just another way to reinforce what a great place we live in, is by displaying it to the entire country. So there's a lot more to this than just the dollars and cents that we're talking about. And if you amortize the whole amount that we're talking about over the 4 years, it's not chump change, but it's not something that we haven't done in other cases for other things. So to me, it's a very good, I wouldn't call it an expense, I'd call it an investment on promoting our community. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. I'll come back to you for your amendment. Councillor Martin, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with a lot of what the mayor said about this. I think this is a very expensive investment for us, because it's not just the fees that we're waiving for this group, but it's the lost revenue from other groups. And it's also the lost goodwill with the other groups. Our local teams that have ice booked, that want to have their games scheduled well in advance so they can let all the teams and the parents and everybody else know when the games are going to be. And to have to change all that is going to be a bit of a hardship for all these groups. The models are tricky things. I always thought that the spin-off benefits from previous models were overly generous, and this one appears to be under generous. I'm not really sure what the right term for that is, but I think somewhere in between is where the truth lies. But I do know that previous models were very generous, and this one seems to have swung the other way on the pendulum to reverse things. I don't think I can support the full funding that's being requested, but if this is amended to a lesser amount, I'll have to give that consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Van Tilburg, you have the floor, sir.
Oh, I knew I should have marked it down before we started talking, because it's been very long. Was it option A that was chosen, or was it option B? I somehow thought it was option B, but is it A that was moved?
Yes, it's A, yes.
All right, thank you. I also agree with what has been said. I think that the dollar figure for the impact on the community seems to be rather on the shallow side. I would think it'd be far more significant than that, particularly if that nationwide coverage happens. That's got to be the impact figure that the city of Brantford could possibly be looking for. Because if we're not getting that kind of exposure, you're probably not getting the great intake that we expect within the community. And that takes a buy-in beyond just the players that are coming to play the game. That's one of those things that the nation you see that when the spark comes, and I'm sure coming out of COVID, people are going to want to have something to latch onto. And curling's often one of those things. Once you get hooked watching that game and you're heading towards the Olympics and you start getting to know all the teams, all the players and what goes on, it becomes very popular. My question would be to Mr. Brian Hughes, what was the deficit that was ran by the Wayne Gretzky Center in the last year? Or the last 2 years? How big has that deficit been for the Wayne Gretzky Center?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor Van Tilburg, I'd have to look that up. I don't have that information right off the top.
Just a ballpark. It's usually fairly significant.
Well, it is fairly significant.
It's one of the largest, right? And
yes.
Yes,
Through Mr. Chair, it's one of the largest under my area, yes.
Yes, it's one of the largest, and therefore there is no, if you don't get it back on a major tournament like this, if we can't make money on a major tournament like this, there has to be somebody in the community that benefits, and Councillor Sless went through the list. But there's no guarantees on that. And so I'm having a hard time with a lot of unknowns saying, hey, we're going to put out other organizations. We're going to decline revenues from other organizations. We have a facility that the burden falls on the taxpayers and then on user fees whenever we're running short, and we are always running short there. It's a very popular facility. So when I look at organizations like this and you say, okay, the big sponsors, big players, they come out to support this, you would think that renting the facility would be easily possible. But curling's not my game. I don't know. I would just assume that would be possible. So without any confirmation right now on television impacts, because I'm sure that's real. I'm sure that creates a buzz because they promote these things before anything gets going. It doesn't just show up and it's on TV. You know it's coming. And that's what creates the buzz, and that the community benefits. I know when I watch those shows that go on sports events, I watch that intros on where they are. I'm hoping others do. Maybe I just do it. I really am interested in where they are, where they're playing, and what that community's like. And the coverage I see when they do those sports events, those international events and major events like this are very good. So my problem right now, there's no way that I can swallow option A at this time with the knowledge that I have. I would be interested in option B and other alternatives we have on things that we have done before, but we don't have that dollar figure now thrown out. So perhaps if this goes past, it goes past and away we go. But if it doesn't, we'll have to put option B on the table. And I don't know, again, how you ballpark a figure on unknowns on what is acceptable right now in order to mitigate losses happening within a sports facility and the benefits to the community overall. Because right now, the way it looks like, there is no recovery for the sports facility. It's not going to make money. And in fact, when you're giving money, you're going the wrong way. And that's a choice that we have to make whether we want to do that. Like I say, maybe that's there if you can understand the marketing when you got television behind you. No, there's no deal yet. And if that person had come, if Jay had come before us and said, hey, yep, deal here, sealed, locked, sealed, delivered, we're bringing that, kind of changes the dynamic a bit, but that's not been achieved. So at this point, I'm very much on the fence, more interested in option B than option A. Right now, option A is a non-starter. Unless I can hear a really convincing argument, I can't support it.
Thank you, Councillor Van Tilburg. Mayor Davis, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to put an amendment on the floor, but I don't want to steal Councillor Sless's thunder. I think he said that he wanted to put one on. He was the first one that said that. So, Councillor Sless, I'm willing to defer to you if you want to put an amendment on the floor.
Sure, I'll come back to Councillor Sless. Councillor Sless, you had an amendment about the televising.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me who puts it on, Mr. Chair, as long as it gets on. I think the amendment would simply be that we're approving the option that's on the floor, subject to confirmation of national television by, I forget now who it was, whether it was TSN or CBC.
So that's friendly, Chair Carpenter.
Go ahead. Okay, Councillor Wall. Go ahead, Councillor Sless.
Yeah, I was just going to say that that approval be subject to confirmation in writing that the event will be telecast nationally in Canada.
Okay, thank you. So that I've heard that's friendly. Is there any objection to that being friendly? Seeing none.
But, well, whoa.
Oh, Mayor Davis.
Yeah, I was hoping they would consider being a little more specific, because in the report, we were told that the broadcast schedule would be Thursday and Friday online streaming CBC, and Saturday afternoon and Sunday would be a national broadcast. So what I'm asking is if you consider, mover and seconder, that would be the amendment, that it would be conditional upon written confirmation from CBC that they've confirmed or committed to that schedule.
Councillor Sless, are you all right with that?
See, he should have done it in the first place, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Okay. Councillor Wall, you okay too? As the mover, thank you. Okay, that's on the floor. Thank you. Councillor Bannister, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you. I'm no longer interested to see how I'm going to vote on this. Thank you, Councillor Sless and Mayor Davis, for bringing this forward. That's the bit of insurance that is absolutely necessary. I've read too many articles by CBC that do not put Brantford in a very positive light at all. As a matter of fact, I did the research and I couldn't find one today. I'm happy to see that CBC is finally going to come into Brantford and report something positive, something good about our city. And this was the opportunity that I think Brantford has been missing in the past. Thank you for your strong words earlier, Councillor Sless. You've convinced me, and this this slight change to the resolution convinced me as well, that we should take this opportunity to put positive light on Brantford and bring as many people in as we can, kickstart the economy as the tournament capital of Brantford. Of the world, and continue on in that vein. So I'll be happy to support this with the amendment. My only question is, CBC backs out or can't make a commitment, or Mr. Allen can't get it in writing, everything falls flat, it doesn't happen, the funding stays where it is, and the groups maintain their schedule. Brian Hughes?
Through you, Mr. Chair. That will be dependent on when they get notification that they either have to cancel or change their ice, because once they change it, if they make other arrangements for their ice, there's the potential that they might not get it back because they've made other arrangements or canceled it. So we will try to accommodate as best we can. It's based on the availability of the teams that previously had the ice schedule.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no more speakers in the queue, just to Brian Hughes, well, if this passes and this moves forward, how will we accommodate the user groups that gave up ice? Is there a way for us to accommodate them or make them involved in some way?
Through you, Mr. Chair. What we will do is we will look at the availability of ice that we have at all at the other two remaining arenas, or at some of the other pads at the Gretzky Center, to see what is open and what is available. Put it forth to them to see what scheduled hours work for their various organizations and best fit their needs or suit their needs. There might be an opportunity for them to reach out to the county as well, or we can reach out, our staff can reach out to the county to see if there's available ice there that they can utilize for that period of time and book them in there. And falling short of that, it might be just a cancellation of their programming for the days in question.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sless, you have the floor, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Keep in mind, we're talking about one ice surface out of 4 at the Gretzky Center. They're not shutting down the whole building to have this tournament. They're taking rink 1, which is the one that has the proper lighting and the proper seating to host something like this. We're not shutting down rinks 2, 3, and 4. We're just shutting down one rink. So it's not like we're taking an entire entity and taking it off the market for that time. We're taking 1/4 of the ice in that building out of commission while this tournament takes place. So I think there was some confusion that the Gretzky Center is out of bounds for ice users for that period of time. That's not the case at all. One sheet of ice in there is.
Thank you, Councilor Slass. Mayor Davis, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I want to make it clear that if anybody thinks based on my prior comments, I'm anti-curling, I'm not. I mean, I went to high school in Calgary where curling was on the curriculum in Big Ford. And when I came to Brantford, spent a lot of good hours down at the Brant Curling Club. And it's a great sport. And if you can get it televised, it would gain certain promotion aspects for the city of Brantford. Plus, it's kind of in keeping with our theme of being a tournament capital. Are we or are we not tournament capital? And if we can do something like this and we get national exposure, that's going to help us in achieving that goal. So with the amendment, I'm now more content to support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now I will call the vote on the option. Well, there's two votes here on the option and then, of course, on it as amended. Thank you.
Is that the option as amended?
No, that's the option. No, that's the option. We will come back to the option as amended.
That's interesting. I thought you would have to amend that option first.
No, the amendments to the option were friendly, and now that the discussion on the option as amended, I think we've had a lot of that already.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, just for clarification, that was that amendment did have the writing in it that was presented. Maybe the clerks can put it up again so everybody has a chance to reread that, even though it's been voted on.
Yeah, that's what I wanted. Okay, I didn't see that part.
Yeah, that's the option A. So now we have to call a vote on the as amended. We'll call that now.
Sorry, Chair Carpenter, could I talk before you call the vote?
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Point of order, what was moved was option A. This resolution was put on the floor with option A in place. We've already voted on it.
No, the option was that we had to put an option before us, and the discussion on the option was discussed, and now we're going to call a vote on the motion as amended with the option. Councillor Wall, you wanted the floor.
Okay, I just have a quick question. We all know, I think, that television schedules and conflicts and all that stuff can happen. I just don't want some sort of legalese causing a hiccup in the event that they have to change this by an hour or it gets pushed a day or forward, because technically, I guess, this thing that we're voting on says it has to be based on what it says in this thing. Is there any room for flex on that? So I don't know how far down the rabbit hole we have to go on this. And I just want to make sure that we're obviously not going to make this more convoluted than it needs to be.
Okay, Mr. Hutchings, can you comment on that? Is there a staff member that can comment on this option, how strict it is, and whether there's some flexibility in it? I think that's what you're asking, Councillor Wall. There he is. You're muted, sir.
Am I on now? I apologize, Councillor Carpenter. I'm having technical problems tonight. My computer's been off and on, so I apologize for that. So I did carry the conversation. Yes, to Councillor Wall's question regarding the legalese. Obviously, we are trying to promote this city as the tournament capital of Ontario and trying to do as much. And I've had many discussions with Mr. Allen about this. So we will try to find as much flexibility as we can. Now, Jeff Daly is our lawyer, and he can speak to this specifically. He's been dealing with this file when it's talked about legalese, and he is a lawyer on this. So, Jeff, do you want to speak to this?
Go ahead, Mr. Daly.
Through the chair, any agreement that we draft can build in a measure of flexibility such that we have 2 days in a 4-day tournament, 2 days of streaming online through a CBC platform, and then 2 days of national coverage, subject to, if there's an event, a weather event, for example, that pushes it by a day, that can be built in. Really, I think what council wants out of this is to ensure there are 2 days of national television coverage on CBC. And so we can honor that in the language, as long as council is comfortable that, if something happens that's not foreseen and the tournament finale is pushed to a Monday, we would require that agreement between Epsilon and CBC to account for that
Awesome. I really appreciate you answering that question. I guess if 2020 and 2021 have taught us anything, is that literally almost anything can happen. And I just, obviously, I was, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Wall. And now I'll call the vote as amended.
Item 7.1.1 as amended is carried on a recorded vote of 7-1. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilors Vanderstel, Sless, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, and Carpenter. Those against, Councilor Martin.
Thank you. Now we move on to the next separate item of 7.1.2 is the Heritage Grant Program application for 176 Wellington Street. Councilor Van Tilburg, you requested this separation, so you have the floor, sir.
I did indeed. Okay, so this property was passed by went through the Heritage Committee, as passed as acceptable for this program, this grant program. How come we don't actually have a grant program?
We have a staff member that can answer that question.
What's going on there?
Mr. Waterfield?
Alan Waterfield, Manager of Long Range Planning. We do have a Heritage Grant Program. It's just a pilot project for the time being. So this is the second application that we've brought forward through the pilot program.
Comes through council priorities, does it not? Did I not see that in the funding?
Yep, there's a funding envelope that of $50,000 that's been set aside for grants that would be funded through this program.
But that's through council priorities.
Through the chair, Patrick Wooster, planner, planning, correct. This grant program is funded through the council priorities reserve.
So my question is, why is there not a specific heritage funding envelope? Even if this is pilot?
Through the chair, it was through the approval that was passed by council in 2018 to establish the grant program that it worked through the council priorities reserve for the duration.
Okay, that's how we decided to get there. This property, it's a cottage home. It looks like lots of cottage homes in the area. What I'd like to know is, is there any guarantees that a property like this could not be demolished in the future to build something different? What is the security on that piece of property if we're going to give money to doing the facades and the brickwork and the...
Through the chair, the property, apologies, Councillor. So the property is protected under the Ontario Heritage Act. So if there was any application to demolish the property, council would receive an application and have an opportunity to decide on an application to approve the demolition. So council could approve with conditions, or deny the application.
Standard of any property then that's within that, basically that same area. Most of the homes in that area would then fall under that.
Through the Heritage Act, there are specific protections for demolition. This part of the city,
this one fits it, and I'm saying that there could be a house on either side that fit it. That's no different. And so, but we haven't given them money, and we have those things come forward. So what I want to know is, when we're giving money, I don't want to be giving money to something and then find out 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, a developer's come in, bought the home, says this has got to go along with the two beside it. And we've put a little bit of money into the facades. That's my concern. So when we do these, when we give money to heritage homes in heritage areas, designated heritage home, how do we, is there a way, a specific way saying, hey, once you've taken this money, because you're doing this work, you know, the process should be far more rigorous on whether or not anything further can be done to take away its heritage. Because we're going to see, and we see that now on a fairly regular basis. I seen one on East Ave where we're going to, where we have a heritage home, and brought to council, and it got told it was going to be knocked down in a 6-5 vote. In fact, it swung both ways. And so if we're going to do these, and people are going to say we're giving out some monies, what's the security? I mean, it doesn't seem like a lot of money. It's what, $3,500, and they have to show at least double that in expenditures. But I just want, because I look at, that's a very common house in the area. Most of the homes in this area, in the old Eastward, would fall under that heritage designation. And I just want to know what can we do to make sure that that doesn't get knocked down or changed in the future.
So through the chair, the area is protected by a demolition control bylaw because it is residential in nature. But the specific controls for heritage apply to designated properties. So that would be only in this instance. We cannot take away someone's ability to apply. The process is legislated. If there are other mechanisms, I would have to defer to the city solicitor to the agreement if there's a way to control that. But my understanding is it's an application under legislation, and that right could not be taken away.
I just want to know. So basically, unless there was a way to write legislation and say, if you've accepted monies under these circumstances, because there isn't, that then we give them this money, and in a year somebody can come and say, hey, I bought this property and ones around it, and I'm doing something different. Or that property sitting on a big long lot, which some of them are in the Eastward area, and the lot's worth more money than the home. So that's the concern that I have. Look, I'm supporting this, right? I support all these old style cottage homes in the area. I didn't like watching any of them go down, but there's an element where I prefer seeing somebody take the time to do something that improves their home, improves these older homes. But there are others that say, hey, we're buying it and we're interested in the property. So, I mean, this is a little step to protect the community, but I know I wouldn't be surprised every day if there's an envelope mailed to that house saying, hey, time for you to sell it and move on. And I know why they want to do that in these old neighborhoods. So I don't want to see city money be given away and all of a sudden find out that it's been wasted a few years later down the roads. But at this point in time with the legislation, there is nothing we can do. This person's doing some good home maintenance, and happy to help out on it. It's going through the Heritage Committee. It's Heritage Home.
Thank you, Councillor Van Tilburg. Mayor Davis, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Patrick. So this property's been designated. Is that correct? As a heritage building?
Through the chair, correct. This property is designated under the Heritage Act.
And you don't get a property designated because it's a nice old building. There has to be something unique about it, or something that is of significance in terms of its history, who lived there and what it was used for, that sort of thing.
So through the chair, properties can be designated for architectural grounds. They can be designated because they are landmarks in the community or because of an associative value. So as you noted, an important individual in the community's history.
Right. And do we know why this was designated originally, what the justification was?
Through the chair, yes, I'm just going to pull up the designation bylaw. It was designated some time ago under an earlier version of the Act, and it would have been for, I believe, architectural reasons, as an example of a Brantford cottage.
Right. So, Mr. Chair, I can support this, and I'll tell you why. Because designating properties under the Heritage Act is really the only way you can protect heritage buildings, and it's not guaranteed to work. It doesn't mean 200 years from now it's still there. And yeah, they can apply to demolish a heritage home, but it's hard to do that under the Heritage Act. In fact, it's hard even to change the doorknobs. You have to get permission, go to the Heritage Committee. And that's the reason why many people many owners will have a very nice historic property, but they don't want to see it designated because they don't want to have to deal with all the administrative issues. So in order to encourage properties to be designated, there has to be something, an inducement, an incentive. And I think that's why the previous council brought this grant program into place, so that there would be some benefit for a landowner to having their property designated, which is the best way to preserve properties like this that are unique in terms of some aspect of the property or the building. So I'm happy as a way of supplementing and supporting the designation of properties and encouraging owners to do it voluntarily. This is a way of doing it. It's a carrot. Here's a carrot for you. And if we don't do it, if we don't follow through and give grants where they're deserving, then we're not giving many carrots for properties to be designated. So happy to support this one.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just seeing no speakers in the queue, I just wanted to say that this is in fact a carrot, and the only way we're going to encourage people to designate their properties, it is more expensive to manage and maintain a designated property, as we all know. And so that designation comes with an opportunity to apply for grants, and the city is encouraging that through this grant process. This is about the best we can do under the current legislation, and it does protect to a certain degree. So having said that, Madam Clerk, we'll call the question, please.
The motion carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstelt, Sless, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, and Carpenter, noting Councillor Martin was not here for the vote.
Thank you, committee. Now we move on to 7.13. This is a work plan, and this is separated because we have to fill in the blanks. Just Cheryl, so you don't have to get too frightened. I'm volunteering for this, unless of course you want it badly. But this is an appointment of a member from each of the wards. Okay, Councilor Vanderstelt, you have the floor, sir.
Circumstantially, I guess I would like to volunteer my services from Ward 1 as well.
Councilor Sless, thank you. Thank you for the levity.
Yes, I'd like to volunteer Councilor Utley. And I'm not doing it underhandedly, although it does sound funny, but seeing that he's not here. But if it's something that he can't handle, I will take it for him. But I think this is an area that I know he has interest in. If he doesn't want it when he gets back, I'll be glad to take it. But we'll put him in initially.
Thank you, Councilor Sless. Councilor Martin?
Yeah, for the same reasons, I'll be nominating Councilor McCurry for this. I think this is something that he will have an interest in. And it says right in the resolution that if the councillor that's appointed can't attend, then the ward mate can attend with full voting privileges. So if he has trouble making some of the meetings, I'll fill in for him.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Antosky, are you all right with me putting my name forward? Okay, I see 2 thumbs up. Councillor Wall or Councillor Van Tilburg, one of you, have you decided?
Never discussed it. Councillor Wall wishes to be on that. That's fine. If not, I'm happy to be on there.
Councillor Wall?
I mean, I can't argue with that.
Well, would you rather be on there, or are you all right with Councillor Van Tilburg being on there? That's what he's asking, I think.
Almost certainly sounded like he volunteered.
I'll take that one. Councillor Wall takes on a lot of committees and does a lot of time. And I don't know if he caught those catchwords there. If the councillor can't attend, the other one can. And quite frankly, he's done a great job in filling in many of the things that I've not been able to attend. So,
all right. I thank all the council for their cooperation here. It's very enlightening. Thank you. Having said that, I think we can call the question on this one, and that we needed appointments. The mayor's ex officio, of course.
I would have signed up anyways.
Sorry, Councillor Martin, I still had you listed as away. If you could cast your vote.
it came up kind of strange. I submitted my vote, but it's just spinning its wheels. I vote in the affirmative.
Thank you. Item 7.1.3 with the friendly amendments for all of the names is carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilors Vanderstelt, Celeste, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, and Carpenter.
Thank you. And thank you for your indulgence. I'm chairing this meeting from my grandson's bedroom as my internet was down, so I'm adjusting. 8.1 was disposed of earlier in the meeting, so 8.2 Ridgewood Avenue, no parking. Councillor Sless.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I could get the clerk to please put this up on the screen for me, please. This is a motion to waive the rules. The section 15-11-5 of Chapter 15 of the City of Brantford Municipal Code be waived in order to introduce the following resolution without previous notice of motion. Whereas there is an ongoing maintenance and operational need to repair boulevards right-of-way on the southwest side of Ridgewood Drive as a result of vehicles parking, and whereas constituents have requested no parking on the southwest side of Ridgewood Drive, and whereas the requested on-street parking amendment has not been reviewed following the guidelines outlined in Public Works 021 amending on-street parking regulation policy. Now therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to sign no parking on the southwest side of Ridgewood Drive, and that the implementation cost for the no parking zone not exceed $1,000 be funded from the operational services operating budget, and that the necessary bylaws be presented to council for adoption.
Thank you, Councillor Sless, and I'll call out is 2/3 required. I'll call a vote on those approving the resolution come forward tonight.
Who's the seconder? Okay. And is there
seeking a seconder?
Oh, seeking a seconder. I see there's lots of hands. Councillor Vanderstelt put his hand up on that one. Okay. All those in favor? The motion to waive the rules.
Sorry, point of
Discussion
order.
on the-
I had my hand up to ask a question about the waiving the rules.
Okay. On procedure? Okay, go ahead.
Please, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering why the waive the rules, why the rush for this issue. I'll be asking the same on the next one.
Did you want me to respond, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Okay. There is without going into detail, there's a serious problem on this street. The neighborhood has agreed that the best way to resolve the problem that they're currently frustrated with is to put no parking signs there. The reason that this is being brought forward in such a rush is there is a process to get it in, locates and all of that has to happen. And they wanted it in prior to frost hitting the ground. So hence the need to hurry this through so that it doesn't get caught up. Otherwise it wouldn't get approved till the end of October, and it wouldn't get in this year.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Sless. I think the hands went down on that response, so I'll call the question on the motion to waive the rules.
The motion to waive the rules carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councilors Vanderstelt, Celeste, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, and Carpenter.
Thank you, Councillor Sless. And just read your motion without reading the details, just the title, because you've already read the details. Your mover and your seconder.
Right. Did you want it read again, Mr. Chair?
No, just your mover and seconder will be fine.
Okay, moved by myself, seconded by, I believe it was Councillor Vanderstelt. Yes, he's waving yes. I think I've explained the situation that as a ward we're confronting in the justification for moving this forward. It's we have a situation. I'll just speak generally because we can't get specific, but we have a situation that can be addressed through this action, and we're trying to beat the weatherman. So that's why we're here tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Sless. Councillor Van Tilburg, you have the floor, sir.
Yeah, is there any reason why we've done this before on other streets where there's work that's been done where all of a sudden you see a temporary no parking go up right away in order that work can get achieved in a timely manner without having even this length of delay? Because this isn't going to get passed tonight. It's still going to be a few weeks, correct? So why would there not have been an initiative taken by, say, staff to say we have to get this done, and we would put up temporary no parking signs. Do we have any answer to that? No one from staff? Okay, not seen it. And so I'm going to assume, oh, here we go.
Mark, go ahead.
Through the chair, Mark Jackman, Director of Operational Services. Again, this is a nom that is brought forward by council. There's obviously things that we can do to help council out with their concerns. And if that is a wish of council, we can work with them to do this.
And with regard to this resolution, this will, I take it that the no parking, is that to be permanent after the road is repaired and whatever else is done? Those no parking signs will stay up? Is that the intent of this resolution?
Through the chair, that is how I read the resolution.
All right. And just so I'm clear on the street, this is the street next to the railway tracks, is it not? And when it says south side, are we talking about the side that's closest to the tracks? Because it looks like an easty-westy to me, but I was assuming that. Okay, I don't like to assume. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Van Tilburg. Mayor Davis.
Thank you, Chair Carpenter. And I've had a conversion on the road through Damascus. The last time we had something like this, I spoke against it and was figuratively mauled and sent to the corner to sit by myself. And I've decided that I don't like being over there. But seriously, you've convinced me of the wisdom of taking the lead from the ward councillors. And so I'm happy to support this initiative brought forward by the ward councillors, subject to one caveat, which I'll normally do anyways in this situation, just asking staff, since there hasn't been a usual notice of motion procedure, are there any concerns about us doing this? Any serious concern about us doing this?
Go ahead, Mark.
Through the chair, there's obviously this is just the right of council. So, we obviously don't have any major concerns at this point.
Good. I've got the green light to support this, and I'm very happy to support Councillor Sless as he attends to the needs of his ward residents.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Councillor Martin, you have the floor.
Thank you. I was happy to support the motion to waive the rules. The reason that Councillor Sless gave about requiring locates before winter comes, I wish him luck with that. We've had a simple sidewalk repair in Ward 3 that's been waiting a month for locates. So hopefully, once this passes, we can get the locates on that fairly quickly. But it's certainly a problem across the city getting timely locates for work to proceed. Hopefully, this one will get done before the frost hits the ground.
Thank you. Seeing no further speakers, I'll call the question.
Item 8.2 carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstelt, Celeste, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, and Carpenter.
Thank you. And next is 8.3, Longboat Run, Elizabeth Montour Avenue, and Stowe Terrace Road, safety improvements. Councillor Vanderstelt, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Carpenter. I am also seeking a seconder. I maybe find one in Councillor Sless. There it is. There we go. Wonderful. Thank you. Section 1511.5 and Chapter 15 of the City of Brantford Municipal Code be waived in order to introduce the following resolution without previous notice of motion. Whereas there is ongoing safety concerns from residents with respect to school-aged children crossing the roadway at the intersection of Longboat and Edith Montour Avenue, Stowe Terrace, and whereas Operational Services has reviewed the location under the lens of Vision Zero and are recommending that supportive of various enhancements, now therefore be it resolved. A, that staff be directed to install an all-way stop at the intersection of Longboat Run and Edith Montour Avenue. And B, that staff be directed to install school area designation and 40-kilometer-hour speed limit signs 150 meters from the school property along Longboat Run, Edith Montour Avenue, and Stowe Terrace. And C, that the implementation costs for the signage and pavement markings do not exceed $3,000 be funded from the operational services budget, operating budget. And that D, that any necessary bylaws be presented to City Council for adoption.
Thank you, Councillor Vanderstelt. And discussion on the waiving the rules. Councillor Van Tilburg.
Oh, sorry, I thought we voted on that yet. No, no question on waiving the rules.
Okay, seeing no questions on waiving the rules, I'm going to call the question on waiving the rules.
Councillor Wall, I'm just waiting on your vote. Thank you. The motion to waive the rules carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstelt, Celeste, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, and Carpenter.
Okay, the motion is on the floor. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Through to staff. If this is a school zone, why was it not already 40K?
Through the chair, we actually only in school zones put those in elementary schools. So this is actually a high school. That's why we don't normally put it in. But having said that, since it also does back onto a park, it is appropriate to do it in this situation.
Okay, thank you. I don't normally support all-way stops, but because of the school and the park located here, this one I feel is important for safety of children in the area, so I'll be supporting this one.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Mayor Davis, you have the floor, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll ask my standard question now to staff, which I think I already know the answer given what Councillor Martin asked. Any serious concerns about supporting this initiative tonight?
Through the chair, we staff do not have any serious concerns. In fact, this actually saves us having to do a report.
Great, happy to support it then.
I have two speakers in the queue, and I'll leave Councillor Jen Vanderstelt to close, if you don't mind, Councillor Vanderstelt. Councillor Van Tilburg.
Yeah, it is interesting that when it was said, why isn't it already 40K? And in fact, it should be. You know, all school zones. And I think if you read this resolution carefully, you'll see Councillor Vanderstelt's reference to the Vision Zero and to bring people's attention, you should have school zones down to 40K. There should be safe crosswalk areas. I mean, that's kind of what every community wants, what everybody wants to see. It registers with everyone and it makes absolute sense. And it's interesting that there are many areas in the city that's not the case. And so Vision Zero, I wish we could just do a blanket, a blanket, let's pass them all the schools and all the areas like that and just get it done, because I know we're doing this hodgepodge. I know that this is going to go through unanimously. It's understood, and why it hasn't been done or been done as an original thought is, look, there's a lot of years of history behind this, but it's certainly something that does make sense to the community at whole. I don't think you're going to see people in the community say, no, I don't want that, especially when it's around parks and schools. So I'm happy to support this. I would like to see something though where we could tackle them all in one go, because what this does do is it generates more calls than all these other ones. And as the mayor said, we really don't have a system. Then when we do, fact is Vision Zero is moving on this as we go. Councillor Vanderstelt's just chosen to bring this one forward now, and appropriately so. So here we go.
Thank you, Councillor Van Tilburg. And I know I've seen that Councillor Martin listening intently as he chairs that committee, so I'm sure he'll bring it to the agenda. Councillor Vanderstelt, you have the last word, sir.
Thank you. That's rarely the case. Yeah, we've gone through this exercise in other areas in the city as well. You probably remember all of the words that were said and all the reasons that were given. One of the things that put a bug in my ear was Councillor Antosky saying, these are the tools that we have available to us right now. It's not the best tool, but we can use it. And that was in reference to another always stop that happened not too long ago. You understand the reasons why we're trying to move this faster and forward faster. The concept of dropping the speed limits down to 40, the public consultation on the community safety zones as a study by Vision Zero is going to happen late fall or over the winter. So we can determine where these zones should be placed. And I had confirmation from our staff on that today, which is good news because the community is crying out for more controls on speeding. That's what this situation was brought to my attention. It was speeders, reckless endangerment, people who just do not care about the neighbors, do not care about the kids, do not care about the parks, do not care about the schools, do not care about your well-being. They just don't care about you. So what we're doing is we're just taking another tool that we need to use in order to try to ensure the safety of people in our neighborhoods. I know it's not the best tool. I think, you know, I would like the process to happen much faster and keep our neighborhoods safer sooner. And I regret that I have to bring it forward this way. But I do have actually one question for staff. It's been alluded to earlier. What is the current delay in getting locates from our sole provider in the city of Brantford? How backlogged are they?
Through the chair, I actually don't have how long they're backlogged. I mean, there's obviously certain things where if it's an emergency locate, we can get it quite quick, but we are unfortunately into the queue. There's a lot of locates that are going on, a lot of work that's being done. There was a lot of backlog from last year. So unfortunately, there's just a lot of work that needs to get done and not enough locates.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chair Carpenter.
I thought you had the last word. I think Councillor Sless, you got your hand up.
That's right.
Sorry, no, it was just spurred by that last answer. Just through you, Mr. Chair, if I could, to Mark. Mark, what would be involved in bringing locates in-house? Because we seem to have lost control of that, and it's causing a lot of grief. And I'm just wondering if it's a big deal to bring it in-house, if there's a certain expertise that we have or don't have, or equipment that we might need or not need.
So through the chair, I would have to provide additional information or get that answer for you, but I do know to bring that in-house, there is a lot of insurance and risk involved with that. And usually it's always better to outsource that service.
Okay.
But it is possible to look at.
I was just curious because it always seems to be a bottleneck, and I just thought maybe if we controlled it, it might be easier to get rid of that bottleneck. But okay, thanks for your answer. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Councillor Sless. I think a lot of the bottleneck in the locates is the amount of work that Bell and Rogers is doing with their new fiber throughout the city, and that's got a bottleneck on the locates, as I understand it. I'll now call the vote. Thank you.
Through the chair, could I just confirm the seconder again for the motion?
Oh, the seconder is Councillor Sless.
Thank you. Item 8.3 carries unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstelt, Sless, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, and Carpenter.
There are no notices of motion on tonight's meeting. I just want to say thank you to my grandson Cole for the use of his room for me to host this meeting. Thank you very much for staff's indulgence. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, Cole.